Imagine this for a second. You're a recent graduate in your early 20s and you just moved to London, hungry for experience, eager to prove yourself, and rocking an overgrown pixie cut. That was me. 14 years ago. My first paid job was in food retail, where I earned minimum wage, which at the time was a whopping £6.19 per hour. I would work from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. and then I'd spend the afternoon applying for jobs in the arts. My favorite place to write and send my applications wasn't the room I rented because it was small, scant, and in a house I shared with 10 other people. No, my most productive afternoons were spent at a pub near Earl's Court, which was full of character, offered a piping hot, delicious filter coffee and an abundant bowl of chips and dips. All of that for about £5. What an incredible trade-off. It will cost me less than an hour of work to afford a tasty snack and enough caffeine to keep me awake until it was time to call it a day and go home. I loved that pub. The stress of writing job applications was offset by the cozy chatter around me, the friendly staff, and the affordable snacks that could grant me 4 hours of free Wi-Fi and an electric socket to charge my second-hand laptop. Cut to where we are now, 2026. You're paying almost £7 for 1 pint of beer and a whopping £20 for a burger. Prices have more than doubled since 2012. All the while, portion sizes seem to have shrunk. Did pub owners get greedy? Are they trying to rob us of the little disposable income we have left? No, of course not. In fact, it looks like pubs and hospitality as a sector is in decline in the UK.
You keep squeezing, you end up crushing it and it will disappear.
My son was going to take over the family business, but now, am I giving him an opportunity to move forward, or am I handing him poison chalice?
Of the 200,000 jobs that have been lost in this country since the budget, over half are in tourism and hospitality.
She decided to put up the taxes of small businesses instead of putting a windfall tax on banks.
And we might be left with very little of it in a few years' time if we don't do something about it. Recent statistics show that in the UK alone, 1 pub a day is closing down net, and 5 businesses are failing every day sector-wide. Pub owners across the country are on their knees, begging the government to fix things if they want pubs to still exist in the 2030s. Across the hospitality industry, revenues haven't recovered to their pre-COVID levels. Costs have surged to record highs with no sign of stopping, and operators are stuck in a chokehold, squashed between cost of living crisis and ever-increasing overheads that are making them fatally bleed. I've seen dummies online blame businesses for bad management, but if you'll lend me your attention for the next 20 minutes or so, you'll come to realize that what we have here is a systemic issue that needs the government's attention urgently. What's happening in the UK that is putting our pubs, restaurants and cafes in danger? Why isn't the government helping? And is the industry doomed if nothing changes? We'll cover all of this in today's video. Let's dive in. So, it's commonly known that running a pub, a cafe, or a restaurant is considered a risky business endeavor. In fact, around 60% of UK restaurants fail in their first year, rising to nearly 80% within 5 years. There are several reasons for this. First of all, the financial model doesn't allow for much flexibility. Pubs have a high amount of fixed costs. These are costs that you have to pay every single month, regardless of how your sales perform. Stuff like rent, insurance, salaries, maintenance, licenses, water, gas, waste collection, electricity, several taxes, and so on. This means that there is very little space for flexibility. Businesses will need to continue to pay all of the above, even during months where sales are slow. Then there's the fact that they trade with perishable stock. Without very close and precise inventory management, the food that restaurants order in excess or don't use efficiently will go to waste. As a result, the business loses money. The hospitality industry has also been struggling with staff shortages. There are less people than before who want to work in the industry, and those who do tend to stay for much shorter periods. One reason for this is good old Brexit. Many of the employees in hospitality were from the EU nations. Before the UK left, many workers from the EU could immediately find an entry-level job in the UK at no cost to the employer. Now, it's much more difficult to come to work in the UK without having a British passport, and this has created a labour shortage for those businesses that hired many EU foreigners. Also, labour preferences have changed a lot since the pandemic. Many tend to favour positions that provide them with career advancement, flexibility, flexible scheduling and work-life balance. However, in hospitality, it's common to have to work long work days and weekend shifts, so fewer people than before are eager to work in this industry. The pandemic has also changed people's perceptions of job security. During lockdowns, many employees in the hospitality industry lost their jobs, and some chose to change industries. They relocated to fields where wages and labor conditions were more consistent, and so pubs and restaurants are finding it difficult to recruit new staff as a result of this change. Crucially, the hospitality industry is squashed by an exorbitant amount of taxes that they owe even if they don't make a profit, but we'll get to this later. All of these factors make running a pub expensive, stressful, and risky. You may have heard pub owners say that their margins are razor thin. This means that the amount of income they generate barely covers the expenses they incur to run the business.
Employed salons are at breaking point. With the increases in national minimum wage, the increases in employer national insurance contributions, business rates now increasing. Where does this money come from? In 2024, we made a profit of £39,000. In 2025, our employment costs rose by £45,000. Rachel Reeves, you need to speak to small businesses, employers, salon employers. We need your help before it's too late.
And they are one small crisis away from shutting down. The solution to this problem is more complex than just raising prices, and to understand this, we'll have to look at the relationship between supply and demand. In economics, supply is the thing that a business sells, and demand is how much customers want it. If we represent them with a graph, it would look like this. On the vertical axis, we have the price of the product, and on the horizontal axis, we have the quantity of the product we're trading. The supply curve is an ascending line. This is because the more the price increases, the more businesses will want to sell their products, and therefore they will make more of it. The demand curve is this one, a downward sloping line. And this makes sense because the more something costs, the less consumers will want to buy it. The point at which the two curves intersect is called the equilibrium point, which is where what people want to buy matches what businesses want to sell. The price is not too high and not too low. When demand for something increases, the demand curve moves to the right, and if it decreases, it moves to the left. And the same principle applies to the supply curve too. The slope of each of these curves is also relevant. For example, if the demand curve is very steep, it means that it's inelastic. An inelastic demand means that it's not very sensitive to price changes. Even if prices increase, people will continue to buy more or less the same quantities. This is common for products with few alternatives or for monopolies. For example, utilities have pretty inelastic demand. If your energy bill rises, there's not much that you can do about it. You still need to pay it. And any other alternatives, such as installing solar panels or not using electricity altogether, are either expensive or logistically impossible. On the contrary, a horizontal demand curve means that demand is elastic, so it will be very sensitive to price changes. This is common for products with lots of substitutes, for example, biscuits. There's so much choice of biscuits available in every supermarket that if the price of Jammy Dodgers increases, I'll just grab some Jaffa cakes and get on with my day. This is a nice and simple way to view the most fundamental law of economics. However, this graph is changing all the time across all markets. For instance, a certain nation invading another nation might severely impact the supply of gas, causing a gas shortage. Therefore, the supply shrinks, moving to the left, while demand stays roughly the same, and therefore prices will spike. So think about the cost of living crisis we're all having. If you've been impacted, chances are that you've had to adapt your lifestyle to the fact that everything has become more expensive. And so you've probably tried to cut out expenditure that isn't necessary, including your trips at the pub. You cutting out pub meals from your budget is reducing the demand for them. And that's exactly what happened at a large scale. Demand for pints of lager and pub food shrank with the COVID recession and hasn't picked up much since, because most basic goods are still getting increasingly expensive, but our salaries haven't grown proportionately. Also, demand is quite elastic for pubs. There are virtually infinite alternatives to having a drink and a meal at your local pub. You can choose another cheaper place to eat nearby, or order food delivery, or go grocery shopping and do your own damn cooking. So as a result, pubs should have lowered their prices, right? Well, wrong. That didn't happen. In fact, pub food and drinks have become more expensive since 2020. Why? Well, the reason why they had to keep their prices going up can be boiled down to short-sighted government policies and the sheer amount of tax increases they burdened business owners with. You are not ready to hear about how much tax small businesses are paying as a result of tax increases and government taxation policies, which are keeping small business owners, especially hospitality and high street companies, on their knees. First of all, we have business rates, which are taxes paid to the local councils based on the premises you occupy. If you run your business from a shop, a venue, or an office, you have to pay business rates. And the amount of how much you pay is calculated differently depending on the kind of business you own. After a momentary relief of business rates during COVID, the government increased business rates across the board, with some businesses having to sustain an increase of 340% over the past 5 years. The government did grant a 15% discount to pubs and live music venues from April 2026.
What the government has done is announced that pubs and live music venues in England will get a 15% discount off those new business rates. Is that not good enough for you?
No, that's a 15% discount off a 115% rise, which is still a monstrous, catastrophic rise.
But even so, the relief is minimal, given that business rates still massively increased overall. Then, from April 2025, the government increased the national insurance contribution rate from 13.8% to 15%, while simultaneously decreasing the threshold. Basically, having employees became much more expensive, and this disproportionately affects businesses that have a lot of people on payroll, like pubs and shops. Will this disincentivize business owners to hire people going forward? You bet. Will young people carry the brunt of this and have a hard time entering the workforce? Yup. Then corporation tax increased a few years ago from 19% to 25%. You get some relief on profits that are under £150,000, but this is still an astronomical increase, 6 percentage points. Dividend tax also increased by 2 percentage points from 8.75% to 10.75%. Dividends aren't a business cost, but this heavily impacts business owners who are effectively penalized for founding and running a business, hiring people, and contributing to the economy. Minimum wage increased, which on paper is good for workers, but of course it will increase business costs, which will result in fewer jobs and higher prices, which will result in higher inflation, which will offset the benefits that come with higher pay. Another issue here is that the statutory sick pay rules will change from April 2026. According to the new rules, sick leave must be paid from day one to all workers, including casual staff and shift workers. This means that if someone who was scheduled to work a shift calls in sick, they have to right to receive statutory sick leave pay, while before the change, the statutory sick pay would kick in on the 4th day of sickness. This isn't a big change for companies that have salaried employees, as they have been getting sick pay from day one all along, but it will make a massive difference for bars and restaurants, as they rely so heavily on casual staff to operate. And now they will need to not only pay sick leave, but also pay the person who will have to replace the sick worker. Let me tell you this is a good thing for workers' conditions, and it will help them not miss out on pay if they fall ill. However, I've worked in food retail before, and I know for a fact that many people will unfortunately take advantage of this new rule, calling in sick so they can nurse a hangover and get paid for not working. Meanwhile, the business owners will pay double the labor. I hope it won't happen and that everyone will behave ethically, but sadly, I know many won't. But here's one of the biggest pain points for the hospitality industry: VAT.
VAT is the killer for hospitality and leisure, and if you look around the world, they all pay less. You know, if you was running a coffee shop in Ireland, you'd be paying 13%. You know, sales tax in America is an average of 7 to 9%. You know, every other country in Europe has relief for hospitality and leisure because they know that you can't offset stuff. You know, you're buying in zero-rated food items and knocking it out at 20%, and it's just I'm angry and sad about it.
VAT, or VAT, stands for Value Added Tax. And it's a tax that VAT-registered companies have to charge on top of their income, and it's ultimately paid by their customers and remitted to the government. Businesses are effectively acting as tax collectors on behalf of the government. They can also claim VAT back from their business expenses. Any VAT that is paid to their suppliers can be offset against the VAT they collect through their sales. I'll give you an example. Let's say that I'm VAT-registered and you hire me to repair your sink. What I'll charge you is £100, which is mine to keep, plus 20%, which is the UK VAT rate. So you will owe me £120 in total, but only £100 is genuine income to me, as the rest, the £20, will need to be paid to the government. However, say that in the same period I purchase some new tools for £10 plus 20% VAT, so £12 in total. Of those, I will only end up paying 10 because the £2 of VAT I paid can be deducted from the VAT amount I charged you. So when I do my VAT return, my VAT bill will be £18, which is the £20 VAT you paid me, less the £2 VAT I paid for my tools. So why is this such an issue for businesses? Well, it isn't that big a deal for VAT registered businesses that trade with other VAT registered companies, because any VAT charged can be claimed back and no one is making themselves more expensive to the other. But it makes a massive difference to businesses that sell directly to consumers. Members of the public who buy a pint at the pub can't claim back any VAT. They will have to sustain the cost of it. So basically, VAT businesses that operate in hospitality are 20% more expensive to the public due to VAT, and they don't get much of the benefit from claiming VAT from their expenses because the largest chunk of their expenditure is labor, which doesn't have any VAT that they can claim back. And let's not forget that there are all the other smaller taxes hospitality businesses regularly pay: waste disposal, alcohol selling licenses, environmental levies, music licenses, food business registration, TV license, personal license, late night levy, and tables and chairs licenses. I'm sure there's more. My personal opinion is that all of these taxes are meant to resolve a short-term cash problem for the government, which is pressured to reduce national debt, but they will disrupt the entire economy in the long run. Also, they don't affect at all the businesses that have broad enough shoulders to bear them. They have disproportionately affected small businesses, community hubs, and grassroots companies that create jobs, pay taxes, and make the economy go around. They didn't affect, say, Starbucks, which sells burnt coffee for £8 a pop, and then avoid paying taxes in the UK through a system of self-lending and intercompany recharges that is designed to funnel profits out of the UK. And listen to this.
It goes when you buy a Starbucks, and to answer that we have to start in Switzerland with the Starbucks Coffee Trading Company, which buys around 3% of the world's global supply of coffee. But the reality is the coffee never actually gets delivered to Switzerland. Instead, it's received and roasted by Starbucks Manufacturing EMEA in the Netherlands. Starbucks UK then buys these roasted beans at up to an 18% markup, immediately shifting profits away from the UK because of the higher costs, and the profits are recorded in the Netherlands. And because Starbucks UK doesn't own the rights to use the Starbucks brand, it then pays another Dutch company, Starbucks EMEA, a royalty of 4.7% on all UK sales, which further funnels more cash out of the UK before making its way to the parent Starbucks in Seattle. There may even be some intercompany loans because interest payments are tax deductible, which further shifts profits away from the UK. And in 2012, Starbucks was forced to admit that it had paid just $8.6 million in tax in the last 14 years, despite recording over $3 billion worth of sales in that period.
And do you know what Ed Miliband said? He's the Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero here in the UK. He said that pubs can save money by switching off beer fridges during the night.
Pubs, restaurants and hotels should switch off beer fridges and ovens to save money on energy bills, the government has said.
Yep. Yeah, he did. Because nothing says great hospitality like warm beer and food poisoning. I can only imagine the round table that thought this puppy up. Ed, you're embarrassing yourself again. This is an industry that is heavily regulated when it comes to refrigeration, cooking, cooling temperatures. If a pub turns its beer fridges off overnight, it has to pay someone to come in about 2 hours early to turn the fridges back on again and get them back to drinking temperature. That labour alone could cost somewhere around about £9,000 a year. So your £2,000 a year energy saving.
You know, it would help us save on our bills if we weren't already doing that. But ultimately, the actual suggestions in this is just frankly idiotic. You know, it actually costs more energy to turn a bottle fridge off and then turn it back on.
Tell me you're an out-of-touch dimwit without telling me you're an out-of-touch dimwit. I've never run a pub, and yet if I apply a little bit of brain power to think this through, I would realize that 1. Health and safety laws would require drinks to be served at a certain temperature, which is why pubs buy fridges in the first place. 2. To get the drinks at the required temperature by the time the shop opens, they would have to pay a member of staff to come into the pub 2 hours before opening to switch the fridges on, which would cost more than the energy savings they'd make in a month. And 3, most of the energy consumption happens when the fridges have to bring the internal temperature down, not when they're maintaining that temperature. So switching the fridges on and off every day is a very good suggestion if you want to increase your electricity bill and sell potentially unsafe beverages. So when you're spending £7 for a pint of lager, do you know how much your favorite pub is keeping after they deduct all their taxes and expenses? They get 28 pennies. The £20 you spent on a burger and fries gets depleted in overheads and taxes, and only 80 pennies are left in the end. That's a tiny 4% profit margin at best. As a reference, a healthy and sustainable product-based business should aim to achieve at least 20% profit for it to be considered financially resilient and a worthwhile investment. This has nothing to do with bad management. It doesn't have anything to do with the market. It boils down to the tax burden that the UK government has put on small businesses and the hospitality industry. It's reached a breaking point and it's no longer sustainable.
Why does everyone hate business owners apart from other business owners? Because I've just seen this headline where HMRC are celebrating a record surplus created by higher taxes. But if we dive into where that money came from, we find that unsurprisingly, it is business owners who are footing the bill, and no one is talking about it. Corporation tax went from 19% to 25%, which is a 6 percentage point increase in just 3 years. That's the difference between a business owner paying a £57,000 bill and a £75,000 bill on the same profit. So £18,000 more for doing the same amount of work.
No wonder so many are fed up and asking themselves what the point is and whether they should move to a country that doesn't seem to punish its workers. So, is there a solution? Well, there might be a few. The good thing about policies is that they can be changed. What pub and hospitality business owners have been advocating for a long time is a VAT rate reduction.
Reduction in VAT is the only way that as an industry it is going to be able to survive. It sits at the minute at 20%. The rest of Europe, even Ireland that sits there is quite high, is 13.5%. The rest of it, Portugal is 6%, Spain, France 10%, Germany is 7%. These are places and these are countries where hospitality isn't thriving, it's just existing. Because at the minute, what's happening is we are squeezing the life out of hospitality. And once it's gone, it is gone. And if you keep squeezing, you end up crushing it and it will disappear.
Other nations have a reduced VAT rate that helps the hospitality industry increase their margins a little. For example, Germany has a 7% VAT rate for hospitality businesses, Spain and France's is 10%. The UK VAT rate is 20% across the board. Reducing that rate would allow pubs to either reduce their prices or keep the prices the same but have a higher profit margin that would make keeping doors open worthwhile. If the government stopped treating small businesses like ATM machines they can extract money from, the long-term benefits would be a flourishing economy made of happy people who are keen to be part of it. However, right now, most small business owners I speak to feel dejected and taken advantage of by a government that is asking them to bear the brunt of tax increases. All the while, large multi-billion-dollar corporations can afford to set up the appropriate legal infrastructures to avoid tax. These sorts of government policies just don't make it worth it to go through the trouble and risk of founding and growing a business. Industry operators have resorted to changing their strategies and offers to survive the crunch. Many of them have worked hard to elevate the experience they offer. For example, many board game cafes have popped up in London, where the public can show up, order food and drinks, choose among a wide selection of board games, and play with their friends while they eat. It's a brilliant idea, if you ask me, especially as these are times where people are looking for incentives to put their phones away and build actual memories with their community. Or take Vagabond Wines. They are a wine bar that heavily invested in making the experience of being a customer totally unique. They have self-pour machines that people can use to serve themselves, and they can decide how much they want their glass to be filled, and they pay based on the wine they choose and how much of it they pour. They also offer workshops, wine tasting courses, and you can hire them to host your event. By the way, none of this is sponsored, I'm just a fan of these ideas. Many cafes also started operating a delivery and subscription model where fresh bread and pastries are sent straight to your doorstep, effectively diversifying the channels they use to bring their product to customers. I also noticed that many pubs are ramping up their mocktail offer, as there's a growing health trend, at least here in the UK, where younger generations drink less and are more mindful of alcohol consumption. Overall, there's a shift towards making hospitality more about the experience to stand out and cultivate loyal punters. It still remains that the biggest difference would be to lighten the fiscal burden for small businesses, especially those in hospitality. Pubs are a core experience in the UK. They hold historic and cultural value on top of being one of the main focal points for local communities, a place where we gather, connect, and form memories. Don't forget that we consumers vote with our money. If you can, my provocation to you, my dear viewer, is to stop putting your hard-earned money in the pockets of big brands that make the rich richer. Instead, you might consider supporting the real backbone of society in making your next purchase at your local business. That's all I have for today's video. Let me know in the comments what you think. Please subscribe to the channel and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.